Into it. It is Overreaction Monday, and joining us to add a little fire to the game, he's played 11 seasons in the NFL. He holds 21 different Panther records. Running back D'Angelo Williams here on the desk with us, and we also have Fields, go ahead.
I was going to say he could take a bump, too, in the WWE ring. I know D'Angelo was geared up after last night's Elimination Chamber, so he goes from one of his loves to another.
Absolutely, and I got Walking Dead last night, too, so I'm ready.
Oh, you love those horror movies and horror shows. I'm not into The Walking Dead, but during commercial break, maybe you can fill me in on what's going on. I know everyone's all into that. But meantime, we also got Field Yates, our insider, and Dan Graziano as well, working the phones here as some news is crossing along or across the NFL. I'm Diana Rossini with you. Let's begin, guys. The Jags doubling down on quarterback Blake Bortles. Jacksonville could have moved on from the 2014 third overall pick this offseason, but instead he's going to get another shot. Over the weekend, Jacksonville announced that it signed Bortles to a 3-year, $54 million contract with $26.5 million guaranteed. This extension lowers Bortles' 2018 cap hit down from that $19 million to $10. So we know Bortles won 10 games for the Jags, leading the team to its first division title since '99, while also posting career highs in completion rate and QBR. Now, despite showing all these improvements, you hear a lot about this concern in Jacksonville about Bortles' ability to come through when the game is on the line. Well, his production here in the fourth quarter or overtime when it's a one-score game sort of lays it out here. Bortles has literally been the worst quarterback since coming into the league in that specific situation. So we mentioned at the start of the show that it is Overreaction Monday today. So basically, here's how it goes down, D'Angelo. We're going to say a statement, and you're basically going to tell us if you think that this is an overreaction. So let's begin. The Jags can win the Super Bowl with Blake Bortles. I'll start with you. Is this an overreaction?
It's not an overreaction.
Why?
And the reason why it's not an overreaction, in 2003, the Baltimore Ravens went to the Super Bowl and they won it with Trent Dilfer. And I think that Blake Bortles is a quarterback that can get it done. The offense doesn't have to change. He's familiar with the offense, and I think he's going to continue to throw the ball around the field. But the thing that makes that offense go is that running game. So as long as they stay with the play action and the play action pass, it'll work every time. So Blake's in a great situation, and not only is he in a great situation, but ownership has shown him that they believe in him by giving him that 3-year, $54 million.
Yeah, not an overreaction here, and we have this tendency to compare quarterbacks in a vacuum across the league. You put Blake Bortles in Washington, where they asked a ton of Kirk Cousins, an ineffective running game, a defense that dealt with some injuries last season, and some suspensions in the front seven, then yeah, I don't know that I'm sitting there and saying Blake Bortles can carry Washington deep into the playoffs.
Yes.
But you equip him with an offensive line that played fantastic last year, an effective running game with Leonard Fournette, a defense that we know was a bunch of tail kickers. Of course you can win the Super Bowl with Blake Bortles. They were within, a half dozen minutes in Gillette Stadium, up 2 scores going into the fourth quarter over the Patriots, the cream of the crop in the AFC. You can win the Super Bowl with Blake
controversial
Bortles.
Calls.
Say that you're still talking about those penalties.
I'm just saying, with controversial calls, they were up.
The the game.
But you're preaching, brother. I like it.
See,
I like it.
But you should stick around. You get a long-term contract for D'Angelo 5 minutes into his first show.
Dan, what are you in?
I'm going with these guys. Not an overreaction. I mean, Field makes a good point. They came close to making it with him already. He wasn't the reason they lost that game. No. He played well in the fourth quarter, played incredibly well the week before in Pittsburgh to beat the Steelers in a big upset there. So they know he can do it. I think the issue with Bortles has been consistency.
Yep.
When is the good Bortles going to show up? When is the bad? And he had a stretch in early December where he was playing as well as any quarterback in the entire league. So he can do it. The new contract is nice, and it helps them cap-wise. It guarantees him an additional $7.5 million more than he was already guaranteed this year on his 5th-year option. So, it's not a huge commitment. And if he has a bad year in 2018, they can start to look at other options. I wouldn't be surprised to see them draft one, for example. But in the meantime, to Field's point, as they're currently constructed, yes, I think they can win the Super Bowl with Blake Bortles.
The team is run by someone who obviously knows a little bit something about winning Super Bowls in Tom Coughlin, so it doesn't sound too crazy at this point. And you guys mentioned Kirk Cousins when we were having this conversation, or at least you did, Field. So, you got to figure the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes is over for Jacksonville, right? They're no longer in it. So is it an overreaction or not? Blake Bortles is a better investment than Kirk Cousins. Fields, I want to start with you. Is this an overreaction?
I think that's an overreaction. Here's why. And again, I just said, we often find ourselves evaluating quarterbacks in a vacuum, and in the case of Blake Bortles specific to Jacksonville, that's not fair. But just if you could choose between these two players and pay them a massive amount of money, which, as we know, when it comes to quarterbacks, you either are on a rookie contract or you're making massive amounts of money.
Yes.
Blake Bortles is an inferior investment than Kirk Cousins. So Kirk Cousins is a better investment, and he's going to be a very expensive one. Perhaps the richest quarterback in NFL history, which is a little bit of a crazy thought to wrap your head around. But this is a quarterback that, if you had to sort of put that proverbial Mendoza line down there for quarterbacks that you felt could carry the franchise, not be the auxiliary part where you have a great running game and a great defense, Kirk Cousins is above that line, which is why I believe is a better investment than Blake Bortles.
Stop being so polite. You've got lots of thoughts. I see it. Field, good points here, but
we were teammates
what is
for a
the
second,
issue here?
And now no longer.
You guys, that love lasted about one segment.
So I want to make sure, I don't think you answered the question. She said, is Blake Bortles better investment than, so is he? Do you agree?
No, he's not. I think Kirk Cousins is a better investment than Blake Bortles.
I totally disagree.
Let's hear it.
I'm going to say, and this is why. If you look at their numbers from last year, they almost have identical numbers.
Sure.
But if you look at their production-wise, granted, Washington didn't have the defense that the Jacksonville Jaguars had, but they still made it farther. So to pay 3 years, $54 million is a lot better, in my opinion, to give a guy a long-term deal that necessarily doesn't have the win streak that the quarterback I just paid have. But again, there's a lot of teams out there that's looking for a winner in Kirk Cousins. So that's the reason why the price of his contract is going to be driven up. He's going to get $100 million over 5 or 6 years, and then 3 or 4 years into it, we're going to be addressing this again.
It's possible, but I still think I agree with Field here. I think it's an overreaction to say that Bortles is a better investment because, yes, a cheaper one, certainly at $18 million a year versus whatever Cousins is going to get, 28, 29, 30, if it gets that high. But this is not the place to cut corners, quarterback in the NFL. This is what they cost. And if you're talking about year over year, 2017 season numbers, you can say what you want to say about Bortles and Cousins. But if you're talking about the last 3 years and a body of work of Kirk Cousins that's far superior to Blake Bortles, you're paying based on that. And this year, Kirk Cousins lost Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon in free agency, right? The replacements were insufficient. The tight end was hurt, as he always is.
Yes.
All the running backs got hurt. 4 of the 5 starting offensive linemen got hurt. I believe it's unfair of you to make a comparison between Kirk Cousins 2017 and Blake Bortles 2017 and use that as the only criterion for deciding which one to pay.
What's your issue?
Oh, my God, Dan. I was trying my best not to laugh at you. But you're saying that all those players got hurt with Washington. What players did Blake have?
Well, he had Leonard Fournette, and he had an offensive line to play with. Yeah, his receivers all got hurt too, but the defense obviously outplayed Washington's by a wide margin. I mean, was that not one of the top defenses in the entire league? Look, man, if you're going to pay Blake Bortles off of 1 year, you're going to pay Blake Bortles off of 1 year. But if you're paying Kirk Cousins, you're paying him off the last 3 years. And I think that's the big difference here. There's a body of work here where the last 3 years, Blake Bortles has been in and out, up and down. Cousins has been a pretty consistent performer, tailed off a little bit this year, but I believe that there are reasons underlying that that can help explain it.
Well, we'll address this again, but again,
we're just getting started.
Jacksonville never had the players from the beginning with that running game. Everything's play action. That's how their offense is set. That's what it's based on.
Right.
Kirk Cousins and that Washington offense, again, they asked him to do a lot, but then injuries are 100% of the game.
Sure.
If you have injuries and the guy that behind you can't step up and fulfill that role, then it's not a player's problem, it's a front office problem.
Which is why
you're saying it's a front office problem.
I'm saying that it's why you take a larger sample size when you make these conclusions. Any team can be beset by injuries for 1 year. You stretch it out over 2 or 3, you have a better sense of who these guys are in comparison to each other.
But by your estimation, you're saying, and I'm going to take this I'm taking it far left when I say this, Nick Foles should be the highest paid quarterback in the National Football League based off of what you're saying because he's the Super Bowl MVP.
That's the opposite of what I'm saying. You'd be paying him off of a 1 month sample. It's an even smaller sample size than we're talking about with Blake Bortles.
Over his career, he's played pretty good. Career. But
I don't think his career holds up to the last 3 years of Cousins. And I certainly don't think Bortles does either.
Well, the good news is we're going to get back to this later on in the show.
He's great overreaction day. He should come every overreaction day.
Yes, you should be here. This is fun. All right, we got some news.